First of all, my name is Jim Dirtlow. I'm the Fire Technical Specialist for the Intertribal Timber Council, and I'm a member of the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes in western Montana. For many of you that are engaged with the Intertribal Timber Council, we hosted, the CSKT tribes hosted the Symposium event last year, and you may have had an opportunity to come and visit some of our homelands there in western Montana. Thank you to the Menominee tribes, right, for those that are in the room, acting as our hosts, and the use of this facility is very much appreciated. So thank you for that. It's always an honor to be on campus here at Menominee, and I'm very gracious for you folks to allow us to use the facility for this workshop. And thank you all for joining us today to engage in this, in my mind, is a very important, timely discussion as our partnerships change, and with the unification of the Federal Fire Service, I think it's really timely that we come together and have a very candid and open discussion about building partnerships in fire management to get the work done that we all know that we need to get done. And long term, right, I would like to have a discussion about all these partnerships doing more to do the work on tribal lands, right? I think that we hear all these opportunities to do work on adjacent federal lands, including Forest Service and adjacent DOI lands like BLM under GNA and TFPA. At some point, right, some point in the future, I would hope that as we develop partnerships, that they would come to the tribes and say, how can we help? How can we help you achieve your goals and objectives in putting, improving the resiliency of your tribal forests and your tribal lands, right? And help you build that capacity and expertise to do the work that you need to do on your lands. So at someday, I hope that we'll have that discussion. Today we're going to hear from our friends from the newly unified Wildland Fire Service, and I just want to again express my appreciation to the willingness to communicate, right, as they're building that new organization to include the Intertribal Timber Council in an almost weekly discussion and update about what's happening with the unification and the building out of both the national office and the geographic area offices. So very grateful to have that communication and have the opportunity to include a tribal voice as we're building that out. We're also going to hear from Gusty Radlinghawk from the Intertribal Buffalo Council, and some opportunities unique opportunities, and it's great opportunity in my mind about leveraging partnerships across Indian country to support putting fire on the land for buffalo habitat improvement. So we're gracious for her accompanying us and presenting on some of the stuff that she has going. We're also going to hear about from Keith and BJ about some of the partnerships that they have going at Leech Lake and the Chippewa National Forest. And I think that if you looked at the map with Leech Lake and the Chip, they're very much intermixed, checkerboard, overlap. So it just makes sense, right, to develop partnerships with your adjacent federal partners, especially when you have close lands and close ties to those forest landscapes and dealing with fire and field reduction. We're also going to hear about from Professor Dr. Adrian Layton later today as well. Adrian, as you may have known, he used to be very integral in supporting Salish Kootenai College and developing the forestry program at Salish Kootenai. Over the last year or so, he's moved on into a position with the Intermountain West Joint Venture Group, NGO that's based in Missoula that covers, what, 13 Western states, and leading an effort to develop partnerships in management and conservation of Western dry forests. So you can imagine that trying to get fire on the land, getting conservation developed and implemented on that broad landscape takes a lot of partnerships, right? And they've done work with tribes in mainly bird conservation, right? But now looking at putting a foothold, making an impact with the management of Western dry forests. With that, and I think at the end today, what's really important, I guess, to the Intertribal Timber Council is developing some recommendations coming out of this workshop. So the last hour or so, Dan here is going to facilitate an exercise that we can document challenges, barriers, and solutions towards really moving the needle on developing greater partnerships, right, in fire management. So with that, thank you again for coming, and we'll turn it over to Dan.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending. My name is Dan Sims, and I currently serve as the Fields Planner for Yakima Nation Fuels. I've held this role since 2023. Before joining the Yakima Nation, I worked as a U.S. Forest Service as a wildland firefighter. I hold a Bachelor's of Science in Forestry with a concentration in wildland fire management from Cal Poly Humboldt. So first on the agenda, we have the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, U.S. Department of Interior's consolidation of federal fire programs, impacts on tribes, and Bureau of Indian Affairs fire programs. We have T.J. Clifford, Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations, USWFS, DOI, Boise, Idaho. T.J. Clifford has more than 3 decades of land and fire management experience, beginning with his service on the Flagstaff Hotshot Crew in 1991. He holds a BS in Watershed Management from the University of Arizona and completed USDA's Executive Leadership Program. TJ now serves as Deputy Director for Intergovernmental Relations in the U.S. Wildland Fire Service's Office of Tribal Trust, following key leadership roles with the BLM and Boise National Forest. He has overseen national fire planning, fuels, geospatial systems, and community-assisted programs, and has long managed major wildfire-related portfolios and tribal partnerships. Since the mid-1990s, TJ has also led burned area emergency response teams on complex incidents across the West, guiding high-risk, multi-jurisdictional post-fire assessments. We also have Juliette Jeanne. She is the Deputy Director of Engagement for the Office of Tribal Trust, U.S. Wildland Fire Service, USWFS, where she leads efforts to strengthen tribal engagement and advance federal trust responsibilities in wildland fire management. She previously served as Branch Chief for Administration and Support with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, with a background in tribal natural resource management, interagency coordination, and post-wildfire recovery. As a member of the Hopi tribe, she has supported tribal and federal partners across environmental protection, emergency stabilization, and national burned area emergency response, BEAR operations, and has held leadership roles including Deputy Director for Post-Wildfire Recovery Program. Her work centers on advancing tribal sovereignty, strengthening federal-tribal relationships, and improving outcomes across wildland fire and natural resource programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, for the introduction. You too, Jim. I was going to start with introductions with Juliette and I. Dan did most of that work for me. I do want to say I have really appreciated ITC over the years, but I didn't really know who they were until very recently, really this year, and getting involved with them in the last couple meetings that they've had. So I wanted to spend a moment and say thank you to the ITC for the opportunity to present updates. I think that these updates related to the Wildland Fire Service are important because it's a new beginning, as Jim already pointed out. And I think it's also from me a congratulations, or from Juliette and I, a congratulations to the 50-year anniversary. Because if in joining this, I think we're advocating for tribes and advancing that tribal leadership in forestry, but bringing it over to the natural resource management where it already has been, and now especially fire and fire management, fire leadership. I also wanted to say thanks to the hosts, our hosts, Menominee Indian Tribe and the Stockbridge Munsee community. I'm going to go home a heck of a lot healthier. As some of you know in the room that have worked with me on bear assignments, I never go out eating dinners. I eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches 3 times a day. So having all this food in front of me, I've pigged out this week. I am not used to that. I come from the BLM and the Forest Service, but I've worked with tribes for over a decade. I think it's been about since 2012, really increasing my time with burned area or post-fire recovery processes directly for tribes. That is my favorite part of my year, every single time I do that. So thank you for everybody. And you guys met Aaron Baldwin earlier today. And Juliette, you want to say anything more about yourself?
Not really, no. Yeah, I've been with BIA since 2011 and actually met TJ on a bear assignment after I just started with Fort Apache Agency. So I'm glad to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. I know the theme has been change. It seems like every update this morning was about change, the theme of the symposium. So just here to answer questions. I hope it was conveyed this morning that this service is really in its infancy, and so this is the opportunity to really shape it. And that's really our goal here, is to how can we shape this to really benefit tribes while upholding trust responsibility. So that's all I'll say in my introduction. We're hoping Aaron would be here, as well as Chief of Staff Joe Majewski, but they are probably lost, so that's fine. But we can charge on without them.
Okay. And Dan, you'll change slides as we go?
Yeah, gotcha.
All right. Next slide. So what we're going to be doing today, we'll go through describing the unification a little bit more than Joe did this morning. I want to spend less time on that and move on to the content of Office of Tribal Trust. So I will go through fairly fast through that portion. That'll include identify the leadership in the room, in your area, kind of define that organizational structure, the consolidation processes, the consultation processes that the Wildland Fire Service went through in November. We'll go through that a little bit, Juliette will. And then kind of understanding the tribal sovereignty and the trust responsibility that we have, the evolution of those things in fire, but now where we want to go, the path forward in the U.S. Wildland Fire Service. We will get into detail, and this is kind of where I want to spend some time today on the Office of Tribal Trust. So Juliette and I will talk about what it looks like, what our vision is for the program, and kind of, like I said, where we're going with the program. We can take questions during our presentation, but we may delay or not answer your question until the end of that section, because we might already be answering that question. So feel free to raise your hand. We'll take it, but just so you know, we might delay a little bit just in case we're answering it already.
Just quick pause. Can you hear us all in the back? Do we need to? Okay, perfect.
Next slide. So, They should be.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so Joe already said this, but the Wildland Fire Service combined the 4 bureaus, BIA, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, and National Park Service. But what we don't necessarily see all the time is the Office of Aviation Services and the Office of Wildland Fire. They're kind of umbrella organizations that worked with us the whole time. So we've all been together, we've all had agreements and worked together for years. This is kind of the combo deal. We're unifying and putting it all into one agency and purposely calling it a service, because that is going to serve for the programs that Joe talked about earlier. Just so you know, I keep looking at my hands and laughing. So if I'm smirking, it's not because it's because I'm looking at my red hands. Next slide. So as Joe said, and I'll go quick on this, Wildland Fire Service streamlines our operations. But what I wanted to emphasize here is the 4 programs. It is not just suppression. As much as we might kind of talk about just suppression, it is everything. It's mitigation, so that includes trespass investigations, prevention, that kind of thing. It is pre-fire, so fuels management. It's suppression, and it's post-fire. All of that is in the service, and all of that will be brought to the land management agencies. So there is still a connection to land management agencies, which in my old job, the BLM fuels management job for NIFC, that was our most important link, is to land management. So we want to keep that. We know that, and that's going to be one of our toughest battles, is to make sure that we're connected to the land. So most of us that are coming from a land management agency understand the importance of, when we go to a fire, we can't just go to a fire. We can't go to do fuels management unless we know what that area looks like and how that area interacts with us. Next slide. So the timeline looks like Dan's on to me, so every time I push the button, all right, that works.
He's a professional.
That's right. Unified structure. So you guys heard this. We've literally been at this for 4 months. We've known about it for longer than that. But when you look at the whole organization and all the 5,000 plus employees, that's only been essentially 2 weeks. We've only been at this for a little over a pay period. However, I do agree with what Joe said, and I think we're moving forward. We're trying to align policy. We spent some time on that since January. We have a good interim transition plan. So it includes what we all know as delegations of authority. Stuff like that is already in place, ready for us to hit this fire season. So if I talk about, but in that transition guidance, it also includes stuff like who signs the burn plan, all that kind of stuff is in there as well. So we have a plan that will keep us successful through this season, through the next few months or so. Chain of command is set up, as we heard, and cost and data alignment, we're working hard to get that figured out too. Again, this timeline is kind of hitting the big point of January 12th being when we sort of started, but the full workforce, May 17th, is when we really got everybody on board. So leadership has been in place for a while, longer than the rest of us, since about mid-March. And that leadership is here. We have Chief Fennessy. We have Joe Majewski as Chief of Staff. We have Susie Bates for aviation operations. We have Grant Beebe, Deputy Director, and he's fire operations. And then we have Chris Wilcox, readiness and training. I'm going to explain a couple things. Readiness and training includes programs. So if we're talking about fuels management, that would be a program. That would be under Chris Wilcox. Those folks were in place before usually as a fire director, so Park Service, BLM, that kind of thing. I want to point out here, which you heard earlier, but Chief Fennessy, the other side, so he has Chief of Staff, and he has Aaron Baldwin, who you guys met this morning, as Office of Tribal Trust. Those are the two top advisors, along with this leadership staff here. Those are the folks at headquarters that are key to making the decisions as we move forward. That is substantial. I think that's why we have the energy and the opportunity to take advantage of now. So the geographic areas, I want to have they have changed slightly, but the geographic areas essentially establish the boundaries of how we operate with fire suppression. So those geographic areas have changed a little bit, but not enough to pay attention to in this kind of a map. There are 9 of them, and there is a geographic area chief or fire director in charge of each one of those geographic areas. They have been used for many years. So if you haven't heard that, this is not a new term, it's the same term. Forest Service is essentially utilizing these same boundaries.
Just to add to this, though, I mean, it is a change, right, from BIA, divvied up by 12 regions. So that was a bit of a workaround how to now restructure within these new boundaries. So.
Are the dots the offices that they're located at?
Essentially, yes. That's where the dots actually, headquarters or where the GA fire director is located. So I'll just go through them. We have one in the room, and I think he's on the last slide of the group, so I'll point at him later. So Kelly Kane in Alaska, Chris Delaney in the Great Basin, Paul Hone in Rocky Mountain, California is Peter Kelly, Northern Rockies is Aaron Thompson, Southern area is Vince Carver, Eastern area, Pat Pearson over here in the room, Northwest, Josh O'Connor, and Southwest, John Cervantes. Glad that Pat could join us today. He's been here the whole week, so he's here. He's heard all of our conversations, and we'll get into some of the details of what that looks like for him and the other GA chiefs soon. And then I wanted to hand it over to Juliette.
Yeah, just a quick note. So going back to the map, there's a North Ops and South Ops for California, but they did combine that into one. So there's a singular GA chief, Peter Kelly, for that particular area, but operationally they did divide the state. So.
Do you guys have the next map, the GAs, and then you have inside the GAs you broke it out into
the units? No, is that some? Maybe Pat can share where you all are with that.
Yeah, so we do have all the geographic areas do have their unit boundaries all set up. I've got them. They're up in the Bronco, but
Yeah.
I can bring those in.
Yeah, what I would recommend is reaching out to your GA chief for that information, and they can share with you the latest. I know it's been in flux, and it will probably continue to be in flux, to be honest, as we go through the season, see how things operated, what worked, what didn't. There may be some adjustments later.
Yeah, they're looking, some of those unit boundaries, unit fire chiefs, they're looking at that as being interim for a little while. So I do think those are going to change. They're working on maps to mapping and tools, I guess, to help them figure out where the best placement of resources would be. And that would go in line with those unit fire boundaries as well.
Juliette?
Yeah.
I hear that in some cases, like the reservation, maybe a unit within the bound or the gap, right? And some cases that's true, but I don't know about or if that's true in all
Yes.
cases, right?
Yeah.
So the reservation boundary could be separated as a separate unit within the gap.
We heard that Northwest has designed it that way, that they've essentially created the tribes, all the reservation lands as its own unit. Yeah.
So all of them are units except Umatilla. It's its own, but all the other tribes in Oregon and Washington are Unit 11, and then Umatilla is Unit 4.
Yeah. We're super interested in how that's going to go this year. It's a little, in my opinion, it's kind of snapping back to BIA business. But maybe that works for the GA, right? And that was a decision that the GA chiefs got to make on their own, what they think works for their particular area. So, any other questions on the leadership before we move into building out the service? Cool.
Any bets on how many of these it's going to take for me to get my hands changed? Okay.
So who do the GAC chiefs report to?
They report to Grant Beebe. He is operations, fire operations.
Fire operations.
Deputy Director of Fire Operations, yeah. All right, so as we began standing up the service, immediately understood that there's going to be a lot of implications and changes for tribes, and aware that we need to make sure that we're honoring tribal sovereignty. We need to recognize the legal status of tribes and the unique government-to-government relationship, and uphold our federal trust responsibility, as well as treaty rights and reserved land rights. So moving forward, this is terminology that's fairly familiar to all of BIA. Understanding now that the service includes 4,500 other federal employees, maybe not as familiar with what trust responsibility means, tribes as sovereign nations. We as Legacy BIA understood, okay, there's going to be a big lift as far as educating the rest of the organization. We also need to be thinking about how to design the organization to ensure that the education is happening, and that this is built with tribes, not for tribes, which was a message I'll cover later as we talk about consultation that occurred. So these were in our mind as the service began to be stood up and leadership began to be placed. Also wanted to say that since the service is within the Interior, right, it's the unification of DOI's wildland fire programs, that trust responsibility automatically transfers. Since the Secretary of Interior is responsible for managing all tribal and federal lands, it thereby transfers that the service is also responsible and must uphold those treaty rights and responsibilities. So as I mentioned, because of the unique nation-to-nation relationship that tribes have with the U.S. government, any major impacts or changes requires formal consultation. And so this is that opportunity for tribes to give feedback. Because the service wasn't stood up yet, this was very high-level consultation. I know we had a lot of questions about what the GAs or the regions were going to look like, impacts to budgets, but really the consultation was, okay, what are the basics that need to be included in this new service so that we can support our responsibilities and duties to tribes. Consultation was held back in November of 2025. It was hosted by at the time, he was our acting assistant secretary for policy management and budget. It's Mr. Michael Boren. He is now deputy undersecretary for U.S. Forest Service.
USDA, agriculture, right?
I thought it was Forest
Service. Oh, yeah, right.
And then also co-host was the principal deputy assistant secretary for Indian Affairs, Ms. Janelle Broderick. So we had 4 sessions, 2 virtual, 2 in person. And again, the consultation really focused on Secretary Order 3443, which was elevating and unifying the Department of Interior's Wildland Fire Management Program, as well as the executive order that preceded that. We did pose questions to the tribe to get feedback as far as what essential services need to be included to fulfill trust obligations. We had a preliminary org chart proposed, so we wanted to hear their comments as far as structure, potential communication issues, and protocols that need to be developed. We asked the question about Indian preference, whether that should be applied, thoughts on how it should be applied, and then finally, just any other unique insights that may be specific to your tribe or your GA, your region, that the service should be aware of as we move forward with building. So, as mentioned, we had 4 sessions. We had over 240 tribal leaders and staff participate, representing more than 80 tribes. It was held during the shutdown, and so we did rely on BIA to get those notices out. But we did hear back too that tribes felt like there was short notice on the notifications. They weren't really sure what was operating. But despite that, we did have fairly good participation. Once consultation closed, we had received 23 formal written comments and letters from tribal governments and organizations. And so, of course, the concern, is are tribes just going to kind of fade to the background on this and be forgotten? In summary, the message was loud and clear that the service needs to be built, again, with tribes, not for tribes, right? We need to kind of take that kind of paternalistic approach away, and how do we actually empower tribes to be able to continue to manage their own lands. So we knew, again, that we need to educate the service on who tribes are, the history, what trust responsibility is, and treaty rights. We need to be able to support self-determination, right? That is how tribes operationalize sovereignty. We don't have that capacity in the new service. That's being maintained by BIA. Again, there's strong support for Indian preference, like with wanting to see that continue within the service, especially on units that directly serve Indian country. But also workforce development, right? We want to continue to engage and hire our youth in fire service. So while many were supportive, I think there was, kind of cautious optimism, I think is what we called it, right, Aaron? They were hopeful that this could be, an opportunity to, again, build this with tribes in mind. But it's tribes have a long history with the U.S. government and establishing trust. So it's like we'll see how this goes, but these are our concerns. So that information was processed and reviewed, and Chief Fennessy did sign a Dear Tribal Leader letter on May 1st that was distributed with these commitments. We heard loud and clear that the tribes like the idea of an Office of Tribal Trust to help oversee and make sure tribes weren't forgotten in the organization, and have it designed, which we'll get into more, but designed both to face external and engage tribes, bring them into the service, but also face internally to educate everyone else on how to do business. So we 3 are hired as Office of Tribal Trust. So we've committed to that and stood up that office. Also commitments, tribal operations and support positions. So as we get into this presentation, pushing for self-determination, awarding officials within the budget shop. Again, going back to that nation-to-nation relationship, and advocating that, look, this is not an agreement with a contractor. This is not an agreement with a stakeholder like the state. This is nation to nation. It requires its own specialists, awarding officials to execute. We need to build that capacity. So there's that piece. There's also pieces for having people that have the knowledge and know how to do business with tribes. So our former or legacy BIA personnel making sure that they're placed, strategically throughout each GA, but also at the national office in the training and readiness or the programs portion that can help assist and guide others when they have questions about working with tribes. The service also committed to establishing a tribal fire managers forum, which we've had our first meeting. And really the intent of that forum is to bring together both tribal fire managers and leaders, as well as U.S. Wildland Fire leadership, so we can work together to come up with solutions, things that we see coming down the pipeline that we need to make sure tribes are able to either have access to or participate in. So that's what the real intent of that group is. It's got representation both tribally, so tribes with compacts, tribal FMOs, as well as representation from each geographic area. And so also we had commitments in that Dear Tribal Leader letter for the first 90 days. Like, this is what we know we can tackle and get to right away. Other things will take a little bit longer. So actually hiring a self-determination specialist or awarding official, that's going to take some time. Also Indian preference, we've been working with solicitors on that, trying to get that applied, as well as clearing backlogs on reimbursements. So that was another comment that we received from tribes, that they've got all these outstanding suppression invoices, right? So we need to get caught up in those backlogs. And I'm happy to say that the GA chiefs have really taken that on. They see it as an issue, and it's not just an issue actually for tribes. We've got other partners too that are in a backlog. So we're working on solutions to help alleviate that would not only benefit tribes but the service as a whole. So I'm going to hand it over now back to TJ to talk a little bit more about the actual organizational structure and design going forward.
One thing in the consultation that I wanted to emphasize, Julia went over it quick, but communication and transparency is one of the things that came out of consultation as well. And we think that is very important, and we'll continue to think that's very important, but that also went into our the design of the Office of Tribal Trust, as well as throughout the organization, was very intentional. It's meant to create an organization that is functional because tribe have responsibilities that are necessary for success. So I think as we go forward and we start now delving into specifically how tribes are incorporated into this system or this service, that's what I want to emphasize is communication, transparency, and that when we do this, when we integrate correctly, we're actually integrating because we need the tribes for that success. So we kind of utilize this list, the fundamental principles, and that would be coming out of consultation, but also I would say when we think through this, we're thinking about it because of a lot of experience coming at least from Aaron and Juliette and I, but also from the tribes, from ITC, from everybody, that experience coming in and saying, hey, these are some of the problems we have. Consultation, we need to talk about that. We need to talk about invoicing that Juliette just mentioned. We need to talk about payments and getting that done. We need to talk about qualifications and resources. So when you look at this commitment to tribal nations, it's upholding those treaty and trust responsibilities and honoring the sovereignty. But I think where we want to go is advancing the tribal leadership in wildland fire management through this service. So that's kind of the goal of when you look at the design that I'm going to show you here in a sec. It does inherent, so we have self-determination specialists. That is part of the plan. We want to make sure that we're functioning so that there is access to the funding, but also access to other things like training, equipment, capacity, that kind of thing. So we have the planning tools that are at the fingertips of the service are also at the fingertips of tribal managers or fire managers within tribes. So that's the plan to address some of those, not only consultation issues, comments that came up, but also just experience over time. So our goal is, we keep talking about it as full tribal integration and operability. So how do we accomplish that in the Wildland Fire Service? These are the three major aspects that we've done so far, and that is setting up the Office of Tribal Trust. Again, just to reiterate, that's Aaron, who's in the room over here, as an advisor, a direct advisor to the chief, so the top of the organization. Our office sits right outside the chief's door. That alone is better access than we've had before. So awarding officials, the self-determination specialists, we set those up to establish the capability in the budget division. So it's not just a disconnect, it's in budget so that we can talk through this. When we're awarding, we know that we have the budget to award. We already have those conversations going because it's set up in the same place. I think the execution of funds is going to be simpler there. It'll be more direct. I will note on this side of things that there may be changes to make, but those changes are necessary to make it successful, efficient, effective, something that maybe we haven't necessarily seen or experienced in the past. Or there are a few examples where that success are, and we need to capitalize on those two and make it better for everybody. So that's the plan out of that. The awarding official, the technical representatives, those would be more located in the geographic area. So they'd be under that organization. So they'd be closer to the tribes that we're serving locally. So that's the plan on that. And it would be in our integration leads or our associate chief of tribal operations. And I'll get into that more in a second. And then last, setting up tribal positions. So we have an established need, or we have National Geographic and field levels that are supporting those tribal leaders, tribal fire managers, in a way that's a much more local or much more specific solution, I guess. And finally, this, I think Juliette and I could probably spend a lot of time all day on this. This is the design in a diagram form, and what we wanted to portray here is how tribes are connected at all the levels. So, in looking at this one, again, national leadership, which includes that advisor to the chief, is mimicked at the geographic area. So we have the office, the associate chief, that is same position to the geographic area chief. So we've got that mimic. As you think about this, it's small on purpose, meaning there are not many positions on purpose because, and I'll get more into this in a second, but I want you to pay attention to the programs, not how many positions we have in related specifically to tribal. So we've talked about the Office of Tribal Trust leadership. We've got Aaron, the director, and 2 deputies here. We'll continue to fill out our staff on both sides. We have what I'm calling the integration leads. Those are the associate chiefs of tribal operations. And we're calling them integration leads because they're meant or intended to integrate tribes into our solutions. That include, whoops. Is there a question? Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here. But so I think the problem or concern I have is, so like, you guys, the Wildland Fire Service kind of parted its way from BIA but now you kind of, right, so there's no more, you don't go to the superintendent no more, now you just go to the tribal fire managers. But we still have a structure where our forest manager is over our tribal fire managers and the superintendent. So the information is kind of going backwards. It's not flowing down through, and we're making decisions that are affecting our sovereign nation, but it's not having the full right chain of order for our organization. You guys had, I think you said, your first tribal fire manager meeting with the new organization. Well, I mean, we may have one or two staff that was there when it affects our whole tribe nation, our land management, and forestry and fuels are the same. And so forestry now is kind of all parted out of this. And so we're not really, even though our land management plans are based on forest health and, and now it's kind of, it's not flowing right, it seems like to me. Maybe, maybe that's just me.
That, like I said before, that is one of my coming from fuels management myself, biggest concerns is that connection with forest management. Juliette's jotting down that how fire sometimes is in. Some tribes have that under forest management. I think that's key. Maybe we didn't think about that, but hopefully back to communication that we actually do that. The tribal manager forum should be able to highlight those kind of things. I will say I had the same conversation with Holly on the bus yesterday, very similar, how do we do this? She's in Oklahoma. Another conversation I had very similar was with BLM, and how now who signs up. Actually, we had two this week. I had one with BLM, but we had another one with BIA. Where how does that superintendent get involved, or when does that superintendent get involved? So I think those are things we know, and we don't have the solution that answers it across the board, I guess.
Joe, do you have any more you want to add to that? I know it's not just a BIA issue, right? It's that all the bureaus are kind of feeling that disconnect.
That's the thing that we hear everywhere. Like that's the main question is how's that going to work, because we're going from, for the tribes it sounds like it's still kind of a fire management reporting to forestry or other program subordinate supervisor relationship, whereas in the Fed side we've gone from we're in that same situation but to general land managers, and now we're partners. So I think it's a little bit awkward for Forest Service working with us and tribes working with us when we've made that shift, but others may not have. So I think it's just going to take a cognizant effort to make sure that everybody's in the room. But I think like everything we're doing is like for pre-fire and post-fire and response. Like our land management agency rep who's on a federal jurisdictional land, they're going to be in the room on all those, and the land management agencies are still retaining NEPA and all those kind of resource objectives, so they'll still be part of the planning process. So we definitely recognize it, and I think it's just something that we have to work through and partner on how we're going through. Like this summer, I think it'd be good to, as that forum's going on, just make notes how it's working and just see how we can make it work in the most efficient, effective way.
I'll get into this chart a little bit more in a sec, but to expand on that in a specific example, in that BLM example, it's the district manager is land, we are fire. So if there is a signature or a decision to be made and it's land-based, so the natural resources are impacted in some way, that signature from the district manager needs to be there. If we're getting involved in any of the programs related to the service, so fire, fuels, whatever, that signature is probably also necessary to go forward. So you, in many cases, and the transition guidance is similar to that. So you're going to need the 2 signatures to move forward successfully.
Yeah, see, and a lot of that information seems like it's going down to the tribal fire managers, and it's not making its way.
Through your
Information's
leadership.
supposed to go from bottom up, and it doesn't always work the best that way.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, we're
Okay.
back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just want to make a note if we could capture that somehow, maybe in the challenges section, we can continue to look at that as well.
Okay.
So will we need signatures on RX plans, delegations from 2 people that go forward? Like the land manager being the superintendent, and then
The fire chief. Yeah.
That actually depends. It would be the unit fire chief plus. It depends on how the tribe is set up for that second signature.
I mean, that's definitely a tribal decision as I see it. So, you could have we're going to be, on our end, we'll have some of the authorities for the fire service, but it depends on where it is for each tribe.
I think it does, but it doesn't, because most of us have forest and fire management plans that we're operating off of, with the forest being the overall component and fire being a part of forest, fuels, and invasive plants and everything else that goes into the main forest. And it seems like this is an opportunity for some to take the forest out of it and say, I answer to somebody else now, and I'm fire, so I'm going to do whatever I want. See it happen, and in the forest, not maintaining the health or not striving for the future condition that class we want, because there becomes a dichotomy in 2 separate splits. It can be worked out, but what's done in the meantime between it being worked out can be detrimental.
Right.
TJ?
Yep.
Can I add something? Those same responses is what I get from the regional director and deputy, and it's not clear now our role and responsibility because of the Secretary of Interior and the 90 IAM moving over to USWFS, or I guess it never moved over, just the authority changed. But there's like the militia, how does that become a part of it? And really agreeing, suppression, preparedness, suppression of fuels, it still falls under forest activity. But going forward in this transition phase until it's actually, I guess, further defined, but even for Indian affairs as foresters, or even natural resource and range management, or hydrology and that portion, that group of folks, their trust responsibility, and we're seeing it now in Western. We have agencies that don't have foresters, so it's rolling up to the region as still that trustee. But that transparency, even through this point, I'm glad we have Carlos there because he is open and sharing stuff. But I think that transparency can be improved, or even further defining the guidance. The whole deal on the signatures, it's listed in the guidance. AD program is listed, but what's the process for the superintendent under all hazards? But things like that come up, and it's going to happen really soon. It would be helpful to know from USWFS's perspective on how that's broken down for Indian affairs as an involvement, because those are things that come up. So well, let's go back to the guidance. Let's go back, and we're still the trustee, but some of the overhead are ex-lawyers and solicitors, and they see it for black and white, not involvement, not necessary experience, but what does it show by policy?
Yeah. No, this is very good discussion.
I think what I'm hearing is since the authorities during transition were just released May 17th or implemented, now that we have those, we almost need to do probably geographic area specific workshops with tribes just to go through exercises or examples like, okay, we have this fire, who signs what, just because we know, again, us former legacy BIA understand that tribes come in all shapes and sizes as far as their fire programs, but again, our partners don't within the service. So working through those exercises, I think, are going to be useful, and maybe that's something we can.
You've seen this influx where all these people have left the government, and our militia. So our initial attack goes and puts the initial attack on there, but the people at the agency and all the other people go and mop it up and work on it until it's out. And I'm worried that how are we making sure that we're building that militia and we're not forgetting, and I think that's our concern. I'll even go, I'm even more concerned about the amount of staff that the U.S. Wildland Fire Service has with the amount of risk that we currently have this summer due to the droughts and the warm weather. And so as we do this, how is Wildfire Service looking at readiness and where the weaknesses are and how we're doing that? And because that does concern us. I mean, that's a natural. And I'm going to come from Yakima, so when the fires are happening, the resources get pulled off the res, and that happened to us. And you talk to Colville and Spokane and the others, and so we just want to make sure that we have the avenue also to make sure that when decisions are made, that we are properly addressed and like that. So I just want those just in general. But I would say that the militia that supports, people in my fisheries program, how do I get them trained so that they're able to be red carded to assist? How are the people in wildlife? How are the people in just trout forestry? And I think that worries us because it's a lot of people that the separation between forest management could lead to that disconnect on making sure that we have people safely trained and ready to go out and fight fire. I think that during this period, the militia and those, I think we need to operate as close to what we've been operating previous to this year through this season. And then I think, Phil, I think you're right. That is, again, it's been the concern voiced in all bureaus, especially me coming from BLM and talking about how fuels people that always step up with the fire suppression side of things, how do we still step up and then go to the other folks like Fish and Hydro and others that are stepping up for militia. Dispatch system, hopefully, the Ross, hopefully that will be, not hopefully, that's operating the same so that they're qualified. I think where it comes down to it for me is locally, though, it's going to be about raising your hand, those militia raising their hand and say, hey, I know we got a fire here, I am available, I am qualified, I got the red card, so I can go forward and help out that situation, even if an IMT is there. And the part for me that I'm trying to also say is, it's not going to happen this year, but in future years, we really need to look how we're training that militia so that we have people that can raise their hand and say, hey, I'm red carded and I can participate in those kind of things. I just put that is my point, I think. Yeah. And on that point, that's one of the things I'm kind of excited about is in many situations across the country, the tribe should be the one that's helping out. And I think it was Jim talking about that we're reaching out to help. I think it is that, and it's both ways though. If you can serve an area that includes trust lands on Yakima and other adjacent lands, then the go-to for that GA chief should be your folks. I think that's important to be part of the solution, and that's any fuel suppression, post-fire, whatever it is. Okay, I'll move on past the slide, but just know that we have purposely integrated into each level of the organization, and it'll be throughout. So I'll get into another couple points here. So next slide, if I can get there. Office of the Tribal Trust has the guidance and the support for the fire directors, with the fire directors. We do think the operational benefits of tribal integration are going to be really important. Next, it's so hard for me to say that my title. I'm just going to go with, Juliette told me, stop trying to say it. You're stumbling way too much. We have tribal engagement and we have tribal alignment. Juliette's engagement, I'm alignment. What that looks like is Juliette's, what that looks like right now is Aaron and Juliette and I are all doing a job, and we're mixing it up a lot. Once we get settled and going, this is where we want to be. Even though Juliette looks like she has a much more important job in engagement, I think both of us, for some period of time, years, are going to be absolutely necessary. We want to, my side, alignment is legal, policy, coordination, consultation, that kind of stuff. I think on my side, on the alignment side, it's internal. It's making sure that we, inside the Wildland Fire Service, are figuring out how to integrate tribal programs with service programs. And so that, and that's going to require having a legal basis and supporting it with legal. That's going to require policy changes to make that happen. That is going to require consultation and to talk about it. So my side is kind of handling the inside of the Wildland Fire Service, but it's still about the programs. The engagement side, Juliette's side, is handling the tribal side, making sure what we've heard just in the last little while, that the capacity, the training, the invoicing, the payments, all of that stuff is set up well in the tribes that are raising their hand and saying, hey, we're ready to go. And if they're not ready, or other side of that, hey, we're not quite ready to go, we've got some gaps, can you help us with that? That's the engagement side, filling those gaps. I think on the tribal side, it means making sure that the qualifications are consistent with the federal side. It means that resources are ready and certified. And then I think to put it on the tribes, it means making sure that you're raising your hand when you're ready to fill that gap in whatever program it is. On the federal side, it means that we need to improve our daily communications. It means we need to be transparent. We need to find more efficient or effective ways to do the job that we in the bureaus were, I guess I'll just be nice and say clunky. The bureaus were a little clunky in making it happen. We want to move away from that, internally and externally. So we've had this vision statement for a while, and I think this is important to pause on, even though we are nearing the end of our hour. And Juliette can help me with this, but when we are engaged, we should minimize or eliminate consultation or asking permission. My take on this, and my take is coming from being a line officer in other agencies and being on a bear team, which is almost the opposite. We shouldn't be dealing with tribes, which is that line officer role, where we're consulting because we're kind of asking for permission. That's like I got to go deal with the tribe.
Or we're legally required to, right?
They have a checklist, and they're doing that as a line officer. That's not where we are. That is not where we are going. So if anybody tells you that that's what it looks like, that is not the intent. We'd like to know about it. We are working with tribes. So the solution is with tribes, period. And that's my experience on this vision statement that we have.
Oh, we'll just keep going. It's time.
So institutionalizing the tribal engagement responsibilities and promoting direct engagement at the geographic area. And go ahead, Juliette.
So again, just recap quickly, the intent for this office, our vision is to make sure that the programs are accessible, agreements are executable, and outcomes are equitable. Again, recognizing the core functions that need to exist. So one, we need to give people the knowledge on how to do business with tribes and also the ability or capacity to do that work. And then also the desire. So showing how partnering and integrating tribes is actually going to be a benefit. It's going to be a win-win situation. I think, not to speak for our non-legacy BIA, U.S. Wildland Fire Service staff, but I think there's a bit of intimidation. I think there's a desire to work with tribes. It's just they don't know how to do that, or even how to approach or start the conversation. But I think once we get that going, there'll be a lot more opportunities, and I'm hopeful that tribes are going to be able to lead a lot of this work, and the service is going to recognize it's to their benefit in serving its mission to actually let tribes take the lead on a lot of this stuff. It's a natural, it's an easy win in my opinion, but it's going to take some work to get there, right? But now's the time that we have that opportunity because it is still being built.
Do you have a strategic plan to do that education that any country 101 across the agencies?
We're working on it.
We are, yeah, totally working on that.
Yeah, it's on our list. Let's see, go ahead and go to the next slide.
So, again, back to what I said about dealing with tribes or working with tribes. I'm not going to read this slide, but this is where we're distinguishing the formal consultation from the meaningful engagement. My take, formal consultation is a structured, legally mandated process, like Juliette said, for activities that affect tribal interests, while meaningful engagement emphasizes ongoing, respectful interaction that values tribal perspectives and expertise across all operations. I'm reading this because I want to have it fairly precise for you guys, for the notes, for those online. Meaningful engagement means that we are prioritizing our day-to-day activities together. We're ensuring that tribal voices are actively shaping the decisions. Formal consultation is best reserved for significant actions after that, so requiring official tribal input or consent. If we did this right, I wouldn't have a job. So that would be the plan or the goal, is 2, 3, 5 years, that my side of that slide that I showed you earlier is near zero, because we don't need to do that. We are engaged fully. You're in the system. I'm not going to read this one either, but we had agreements with tribes before. We'll eventually renew all of those agreements with the Wildland Fire Service. That'll be more efficient. We really want to look at find solutions that create a system where you guys are integral to that success, to our success, the Wildland Fire Service. I will say real quick on this one, agreements that tribes have now currently will continue until they expire, or 3 years. So if they have an agreement with BIA now, Juliette will probably get into this more later, but yeah.
All right, so now just moving into, again, how tribes, or how we operationalize sovereignty and self-determination. So within the fire service, or within fire management, right, BIA funds tribes, or funded tribes in tribal programs using various mechanisms. So under self-determination, PL 93-638, we've got our contracts, and through self-governance, the compact agreements. And those are for more, program kind of recurring types of activities. The cooperative agreements, those are for your suppression activity and more of a reimbursement style. So again, we are working to establish this capacity, this capability within the service. It's going to take some time. Our other sister bureaus are also dealing with cooperative agreements. It's not just a BIA thing, but we are aware. Got a lot of questions from tribes, our agreements expiring, what's going to happen. So it is on the radar. We're working on a template, and it's currently with solicitors to review, to be able to offer, okay, this is something tribes can work with. We'll sign new agreements with the service moving forward. In the meantime, BIA has committed to continue to honor and support those while we are in transition. And we talked about this again earlier about having the awarding officials and our AOTRs that are currently assigned. They're going to maintain those duties again during transition, right? We're going to be in this period where a lot of us will still be doing two jobs, recognizing we still need to support what we were doing before as we move into our new role. So there's going to be a lot of overlap, but eventually we will have new AOTRs assigned as makes sense for that GA or that unit, and those agreements become renewed with the service. And we'll jump over to Path Forward. Oh, yeah.
Can I ask a question before we move on?
Sure.
On that 638 slide, so you know the history of BI. If the agency is funded at 250, but they have all the suppression equipment and overhead that's maybe idling because they can't fill positions outside of severity, but because USWFS is a whole new organization, different funding, would the tribes have the opportunity to request positions so they can fully staff all their engines, their overhead, and fully work as a tribal wildland fire management fuels program?
Did you hear that, Aaron? I don't know if you want to comment.
As the Wildland Fire Service conducts that standards of cover exercise that was just announced recently, that they would be able to review and adjust, right, the needs of tribal folks under those situations. That's my hope.
Yeah, so funding's being maintained.
Yeah.
What was funded in 2025 is being maintained for now, but that would be, I think, a discussion we would definitely bring up through the Tribal Fire Managers Forum, but then also with leadership. Did Aaron step out? Oh. Chief of Staff.
I'll say so the funding source is the same. And as we saw in the presentations this morning, the fire program's flat across Wildland Fire Service and through USDA Forest Service. But I mean, yeah, the intent is as we get organized this year is a status quo. And of course, we have to recognize that our funding is determined by Congress. They're the one who control the purse strings. But one of our priorities is to try to tell our story better, get some metrics together on what our capacity needs are, and the stands of cover is one way that we're looking at doing that, and that would include tribal trust lands as well in that evaluation process. Something we have to work with you guys closely at, but we're still a few months away from really even starting on that in any meaningful way outside of procurement action, stuff like that. Yeah, so that is the intent. And we hope that we're able to, as a Wildland Fire Service, and I talked about the data integration and the costing and those types of things that will help us get some better metrics, and we want to make sure that those work for tribes too. So we'll be working with the Office of Tribal Trust, Tribal Forum, et cetera, to make that connection.
Just the last thing, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe of the history of the annual funding agreements, where tribes have made that request to fully fund the program, but because of the federal level budget funding, they have to change or update their budget to reflect what's actual. But there's probably a lot of leverage there that needs to get convinced to Congress or who it may be.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah.
I'd like to say, most universities who have SAF accreditation are having their students go through and get at least their red card. So that would be a really good place for tribes to reach out to the universities and be able to partner with the universities to at least get them some basic wildland firefighters if you guys have the need for that. So a resource that most people may not be thinking about.
Thank you. We'll try to move this along. So this next section is essentially the path forward, and we're almost done. So looking ahead, we do realize or are hopeful that there's a lot of opportunity here for tribes to be elevated. And where this is coming from is that now with everybody under one mission, it really amplifies, tribal presence and tribal needs, as well as tribal knowledge and expertise. And so we see there being potential there. One of the objectives for this unification is to remove barriers, right, to do cross-boundary work. So again, we think that's an opportunity where tribes can really take the lead. It's also allowing tribes direct access to services where, as before, it may have been, an indirect or kind of a convoluted path. But now that the service has this sole mission of fire management, right, whereas under BIA, we all know BIA has a very broad mission with a lot of other priorities. Fire was just one of those components. But now having this focus, I think there's, again, potential to do some great things. And I did want to say that, again, as we go through this, there's going to be a lot of learning that's going to be occurring. And Chief Fennessy has shared when he first came on a message to all staff that he operates under 3 guiding principles or pillars. And that includes change, learning, and continuous improvement. And I think we all know that fire management is, we're continually trying to learn and do better. That's common practice, right, to review lessons learned, hold AARs, and I truly believe, we're going to do this as we go through this first few months. First year in operation, we are going to look back and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, how do we do better? So I'll hand it over to you, TJ.
So direct access, I think part of that, the beauty of this is, I'm just going to expand a little bit on Juliette's slide. Direct access, what that means today versus yesterday. Today, direct access means trust lands are DOI land, so we can really engage both directions a lot easier with the Wildland Fire Service, and that's the part that we want to bring us together at. And so we've kind of built it that way. Whereas before, yesterday, it was more like there was a line to cross for each bureau, especially the BLM, Park Service, and others. It was like, wait a minute, that's on the reservation, or wait a minute, that's trust lands. They could have done it, but there was a line that they were crossing. There's no line anymore. So that's why we think that's going to work for more direct access. Just real quick, we haven't highlighted tribal success, and I know I've talked to a couple of people in the room, Curtis over there in the corner, Dan here. We have the opportunity, in my opinion, now, before anybody else gets up to speed. You guys are doing work right now in fuels. Dan, Curtis, others. If we have those pictures, those blurbs, those stories about what you're doing now, we can show how much we are doing on tribal lands for the Wildland Fire Service and get ahead of this curve. And I think that's a really good idea to bring forward. And I would, even using the email in this presentation to Juliette and I, send it to us. We've got people that can help us share our message on social media about what we are doing in these programs right now. That was all I really wanted to say about this. Unless you have more to add.
No, go ahead. Let's keep going. I know everyone's hungry. So again, the service is committed. we are committed to honoring the nation-to-nation relationship and trust responsibilities, and truly embedding traditional knowledge and practices. I think we aren't there yet because we are so new, right? The focus has been getting us aligned under a single budget structure, getting staff moved over. Like, that's been our focus right now, but know that this is what we're already thinking about. And as TJ said, trying to be ahead of the curve. How do we make sure tribes, have a foot ahead of the other bureaus in this work? So, very quickly, just we won't read this, but in closing, status where we're at. We've completed the consultations. We've stood up the forum, got OTT going, but we still got a lot to do ahead of us, right? And that's what our goal is going to be in the coming months and years. And so just in closing, effective tribal trust and integration within the service will strengthen our partnerships. It's going to respect sovereignty and enhance fire management. So this collaborative approach that we are proposing will benefit both the tribes and the U.S. Wildland Fire Service in protecting and our cultural and natural resources, not only for this generation, but generations to come. So that is it. We're done. Apologies for running a little long.
Remember, it's program to program. Ensure programs are accessible, agreements are executable, and outcomes are equitable. So we're not doing this crossing the line. It's if you got a fuels program on a tribe, you're working with a fuels program on the service. Program. Integration completely. That's a pep talk, so raise your hand if you can do that. Who won the bet? Because they're not done, and I've gone through like 5 already.
All right, we'll see everyone here after lunch.